Right, so I'm going to talk about the other half of the Weather Walks, Weather Talks project, the Weather Walk side of things. I'd like to just acknowledge colleagues at Nottingham and Glasgow for their contributions to the project and this paper. So Weather Walks focused on the work that British climatologist and geographer Gordon Manley completed in the North Pennines of England, paying particular attention to his investigation of the Helm wind between 1937 and 1939. Walking is increasingly becoming considered as a strategy for developing innovative approaches to knowledge production, and the audio or mixed media walk in particular has been highlighted as offering an exciting way of creating a more nuanced, embodied, multisensory experience of place. So in addition to exploring Gordon Manley's paper archive for this project, the research process or methodology included a number of team walks in the North Pennines. These were targeted towards the production of what became a 10-mile audio walk for the Royal Geographical Society initiative Discovering Britain, which they describe as an exciting series of geographically themed walks that aim to bring stories alive and to inspire everyone to explore and learn more about Britain. The walks that we completed helped us to decide on the route for the audio walk, but also, and I think perhaps more importantly, helped us to engage with the weather of the North Pennines in place and to enhance our own understandings of the situational relevance of Gordon Manley's work. Our contribution to the series, titled Troublesome Wind, follows what Tim Ingold might call Manley's footsteps through the weather world of Cross Fell, the highest peak along the Pennine Way. Along the way, we reveal some of the hidden stories of the landscape and Gordon Manley's engagement with it, with extreme weather prominent throughout. The finished audio walk and our exploratory ramblings thus form another method of recording, visualising and disseminating cultural memories of extreme weather. And some of these belong to Gordon Manley and other figures associated with the area. And we're going to share a few of them with you today. So the English Pennines form a continuous chain stretching from the Peak District in Derbyshire to the Cheviot Hills on the England-Scotland border. Our walk starts in the village of Knock in the Eden Valley, near where Alex was talking about earlier, and then joins the national trail, the Pennine Way, to climb to the summit of Great Dun Fell before looping back around a radar station at the top and descending along a private road. The audio downloads for the walk feature ex-BBC weather presenter John Ketley as a narrator and staff and students of the School of Geography at Nottingham as other members of our cast. And I would say that having this celebrity name was definitely an advantage in publicising our walk. For all the Discovering Britain walks, the audio downloads can be supplemented by a booklet, and we have some here with us today, and I don't want to take any home. So if anyone's planning a visit to the Eden Valley soon, please do think about doing our walk, or just reading the nice story. In our case, it was also accompanied by an experimental mobile application which used a system of trigger zones to relay media associated with each point of interest, and these were kind of archival materials and locational tools in text, image and audio and video forms at the appropriate time along the walk. And they also enabled the user to add personal observations of the weather and the landscape that day through text, audio and photograph. So, Gordon Valentine Manley, pictured here, has been described as probably the best known, most prolific and most expert on the climate of Britain of his generation. He started collecting meteorological data on the North Pennines in 1932 and was attracted to the region and particularly to the area around Cross Fell, in his own words, as the most extensive area of bleak, uncompromising upland that England possesses. The hills of the North Pennines do generally receive more rain and snowfall, stronger winds and colder temperatures than the surrounding areas. And they're also home to England's only named wind, the Helm. The Helm wind, as pictured in this diagram, is an example of a foam-type wind, typically dry and that acts downslope in the lee or downward slope of a mountain range. During an occurrence of the helm, a heavy bank of cloud rests along the Crossfell range. Meanwhile, 3 or 4 miles from the foot of the fells, a cigar-shaped, distinctive, fierce, rolling cloud known as the helm bar forms. A strong, cold wind blows down the steep slope until it reaches the bar and suddenly ceases. The helm is thus a true local wind because it is a product of the particular landscape and climatic conditions found at Crossfell. Gordon Manley was an avid walker who particularly enjoyed long walks at high altitude, and he documented many of his walks in notebooks, like this one on the left. Whilst living in Durham, he regularly walked up the North Pennine Hills, and when snow cover allowed, he also skied. Weather featured prominently in his walking notes, as this extract shows. So this is from the 5th of June 1929, and he's walking briskly up Crossfell. And he mentions the warm sun, cool breeze, a stop for tea, and then some thunder and rain on his way back down. So in 1932, he was able to set up his own climatological station at Moor House, a gamekeeper's cottage, around 3 miles from the summit of Great Dun Fell, 5 miles from its nearest neighbours, and 1,840 feet above sea level. Manley believed that it was probably the most remote house in England. And we know that life was not easy from the resident Armstrong family. In one letter they describe at Christmas 1940, a snowdrift reaching more than halfway up the stairs inside their cottage. The Armstrongs helped Manley with his meteorological measurements, writing to him regularly about the weather, including the helm wind. They also sent the recording sheets back down from the station to Manley. And perhaps his interest in the helm wind was triggered by his conversations with the Armstrong family, because he began to investigate and found references in literature to the helm dating back to before 1700. In our research, the earliest newspaper reference we found dated from 1794. This example from the Westmoreland Gazette is slightly later, from 1831, and refers to the death of a horse being caused by the helm wind, the horse being so frightened when the wind suddenly descended and the heat was whirling around, scattered in all directions. The horse became terrified, set off at a gallop, rushing headlong down a precipitous rock, and was killed dead on the spot. Right. An emerging scientific interest in the helm wind can be identified through the 19th century. Reverend William Walton provided remarks on the helm wind to the Royal Society in 1830, and he explained, "It is accompanied by a loud noise like the roaring of distant thunder, and is carefully avoided by travellers in that district as being fraught with considerable danger." Published accounts of the helm wind appear with greater frequency in historical and geographical guides for the counties of Cumberland and Westmoreland from the 1820s. But a limited understanding of the helm served to attract national attention and fostered a series of scientific investigations. In 1884, Reverend Joseph Brunskill read a paper on the helm wind at a meeting of the Royal Meteorological Society. Following the interest the paper generated, the Society decided to put a letter in the local Penrith newspapers asking for people's records and observations of the helm wind. And from the responses, they identified 93 instances of the helm in the 14-year period from 1871 to 1884. And they also received a number of visual depictions of the helm wind, including this watercolour. As part of the committee's ongoing investigations, the Assistant Secretary of the Royal Meteorological Society, William Marriott, visited Crossfell and the Helmwind district, accompanied by a local volunteer and also member of the Royal Meteorological Society, who had volunteered to act as local superintendent to the investigation. In August 1885, they were so fortunate to witness a slight helm on what I think was their only visit to the area, so it was very fortunate. Their subsequent account highlighted the sudden transition in air temperature and wind speed as they walked away from the helm. And they were frequently told that haystacks were sometimes overturned, men on horseback blown out of the saddle, and other damage done by the wind. In 1937, Gordon Manley received a grant from the Leverhulme Trust to establish a weather recording station close to the summit of Great Dunfell, so as to be able to complete his own study of the helm wind. On the walk, you would be encouraged to speculate as to the exact location of his station, which is no longer there, but you can see some images of the huts in place on the slide. The wooden hut measured just 8 feet by 6 feet by 6 feet, and was equipped with 2 thermographs to measure temperature continuously, thermometers for temperature measurements on the days that Manley visited the station, a barograph to measure pressure, and a portable cup anemometer to measure wind speed and direction. During his first year of observations, Manley found occurrences of the helm wind tantalisingly few. He also faced difficulties in keeping the instruments operational under the severe weather conditions at altitude. You can probably see the snow in the Stevenson screen to the left. But he did manage to keep a continuous record of temperature for a period of 3 years, from 1937 to 39, and this remains to this day the longest unbroken mountain temperature record in the UK. Manley himself made over 100 visits to the hut, often using skis for the final stage of his journey to the summit. You can see his skis sticking in the ground there. He noted that the hut was admirably weatherproof, and that occasional small misadventures in the darkness, mist, wind and snow of a December night were offset by the many pleasures. In 1939, when he was recalled to Cambridge as a university demonstrator in geography on the outbreak of the Second World War, he relied on the efforts of Mr. Somerville Patterson, locally of Kirkby Thor, to maintain his record in a season when changing the charts meant on occasion 15 miles walking in deep snow. So you get a sense of the commitment that was required to keep this record. Gordon Manley, as we've already kind of hinted at, was very good at discussing his work generally and on the helm wind through the mass media as well as in academic journals. So he was very kind of publicly focused as well as academic focused. And he wrote regular articles in the Manchester Guardian and also took part in radio programmes. And this is just a short extract from a BBC radio transcript that also demonstrates the role that walking played in his investigations of the helm wind. It's from Thursday the 16th of February 1939. To walk up the fell side against it, the helm wind, is an unforgettable experience, and while I don't object to wind, I don't recommend going up in a helm for pleasure. One stoops against it with everything buttoned up as tight as can be and slogs warily up the hill with this steady roaring torrent of air pressing against one, sometimes at 50 or 60 miles per hour, even on a fine day. It is very tiring, and if there is snow about, it causes severe drifting. Further, east winds being what they are, it is bitterly cold. On the morning of the 1st of May, on the summit, it blew a gale from the northeast with a temperature of only 29 degrees at my hut, it would be -2 centigrade. So after his observations at Great Dunfell were complete, as many of you I'm sure know, Manley began to work more and more on collecting, analysing and interpreting other people's weather observations and climate records. In recognition of his achievements, he was elected President of the Royal Meteorological Society in 1945. He went on to publish the hugely successful Climate in the British Scene in 1952 and the Central England Temperature Series in 1953, later updated and extended in 1974 to cover the period from 1659 to 1973. To conclude, I'd like to just return briefly to the mobile app and audio downloads available for our walk. Both technologies bring media associated with Manley's work on Great Dunfell to the user on location with the aim of augmenting the visitor experience to the North Pennine Hills. The focus, we hope, remains on the experience of landscape, and the navigational aid present in the app is not designed to replace a traditional map. We hope that the technology facilitates access to and exploration of archival materials with situational relevance, inspiring others to follow in Manley's footsteps through the weather world, to explore the role of climate in shaping the British landscape and its people. From our perspective, producing creative and accessible resources has been richly rewarding. Although it is difficult for us to know exactly how the resources we've produced are being used and by whom, the narratives that we've made available add a richness to the meteorological data on extreme weather, which continues to be generated in the North Pennines. We do know that the walk webpage has been visited over 1,600 times, and our walk is the 17th most downloaded of 130 in the series. So given that it's one of the most challenging walks in the series, we're especially happy with that. To give you a sense of perhaps the landscape and the challengingness of this walk, some photos. In the preface to Climate in the British Scene, Manley suggested that climate should be apprehended as a whole and through several senses. He asked the reader to therefore try to recall not merely the meteorological situation, but all the feelings and associations of landscapes at various seasons. As the photographs show, we experienced a range of seasons on our walks up Great Dunfell, and although we are yet to experience the helm wind, each trip reinforced the importance of researching weather in place, and in some cases created new cultural memories of extreme weather. Thank you.